The royal court brought Liora Venn to the death stone because a servant's heart was supposed to confess before her mouth could defend her. No one asked why a stone that judged servants sounded so tired of royal blood. A relic tired of royal blood was not judging servants. It was carrying something for kings. The black judgment relic stood in the center of the blood hall, taller than a kneeling woman, polished smooth by generations of condemned hands. It did not shine like marble. It swallowed light. And sometimes when the hall was empty, it swallowed rhythm too. Rhythm did not vanish in the blood hall. It was stored. Around its base, silver veins pulsed faintly beneath the surface, each throb slow and cold, as if the stone had learned how to imitate life without ever becoming alive. Liora knelt before it with her wrists bound in red judgment cord. Not chains. Chains were for prisoners with names worth recording. Cord was for servants. Cord did not say prisoner. Cord said disposable. And disposable people were easiest to make responsible for royal damage. Her gray oath dress had been scrubbed clean, but the cuffs were frayed from years of washing royal floors, carrying firewood, and polishing the very stones that now waited to decide whether she deserved to keep breathing. Her dark hair had been pulled back too tightly by the guards, exposing the small servant brand behind her left ear, a crown broken through by a line of ash. Oath-bound property of the Morcant bloodline. The court had made sure everyone could see it. High Blood Judge Caldris Vey stood beside the death stone in robes the color of dried wine. His face was thin, patient, and almost kind in the way executioners became kind when they believed procedure made them clean. "Liora Venn," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "You are accused of laying a wasting curse upon the royal bloodline." The nobles above her murmured behind their wolf fur collars. Liora kept her eyes down. "Acurse." That was what they called it when the royal heir's blood pulse had weakened after she held him through the night. They did not say she had been the only servant willing to stay when the royal cradle began shaking. They did not say the heir's pulse had steadied only when her palm rested gently against his chest. They did not say his heartbeat had answered hers for 3 quiet breaths before the blood healers tore him away. They only said the next morning his royal pulse had faltered, and a servant had touched him. That was enough. Caldris lifted one long finger toward the stone. The death stone records only guilty hearts. If your heart has fed corruption into the royal line, the stone will beat with your crime. Liora's bound hands tightened. She had cleaned this hall since she was 12. She knew the stone's sound. At night, when no noble stood nearby to praise its justice, it did not sleep. It murmured. It thudded beneath the floor like something full of stolen pulses. Servants whispered that guilt made it beat. Liora had never believed that. Guilt did not sound so tired. Stolen hearts did. Liora had heard enough stolen things to know they did not sound guilty. They sounded trapped. The great doors opened. The entire hall lowered its head before Alpha King Rhaevan Morcant entered. He moved like a storm taught to wear armor. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black wolf leather and silver royal plating, he carried no sword, because no one in the blood hall needed reminding that his command could become death faster than steel. His black hair fell to his jaw, and his eyes were the pale gold of a wolf watching from winter dark. Behind him, his royal wolf shadow moved against the stone wall. It was huge. Too huge. A shape of black fur and old moonlight, its shoulders nearly brushing the carved arches. But something in it flickered. A faint weakness passed through its chest with each breath so quickly most would miss it. Liora did not. She had always heard hearts wrong. Too clearly. Too deeply. That was why she knew the stone was not listening for guilt. It was listening for ownership. And ownership in the blood hall always moved upward before blame moved down. The king stopped before the death stone, and the court parted around him. For one instant, his gaze touched Liora. Not softly. Not mercifully. He looked at her as a ruler looked at a danger placed in his hall, measured, controlled, and ready to be ended. "You served in the blood nursery," he said. His voice was low enough that it should not have carried, yet every ear in the hall caught it. "Yes, Majesty." "And you touched the air." His pulse was failing. A noblewoman laughed under her breath. Caldris smiled faintly. The condemned often make interference sound like mercy. Liora looked up then. Only a little. Enough to see the king's expression sharpen. "I did not curse him," she said. The hall went still, offended that a servant had used her voice before being asked for it. Caldris's smile disappeared. The stone will not need your denial. Raven's gaze remained on her face. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes, not pity, not trust. Recognition, perhaps, though, of what she could not know. Then he turned to Caldris. Proceed. The word struck Liora harder than any hand. Proceed. A clean royal word for placing her heart into a machine that had been hungry long before she was born. Caldris dipped a silver quill into a shallow bowl of black ink and handed it to the king. By ancient right, the Alpha King must sign the sentence before the stone may listen. Rhaevan took the quill. The death stone pulsed once. Liora heard it beneath the floor. Not with her ears, with the strange, shameful sense she had spent her life hiding. A heart answered inside the stone. Old. Weak. Not hers. Her breath caught. Rhaevan stepped to the judgment tablet resting against the stone. His hand did not tremble as he wrote his name across her death sentence. Rhaevan Morcant. Alpha King. Final witness. A king's name made procedure look clean. It did not make it true, but it made the death sentence legal enough to kill her. The moment the last stroke touched the tablet, the death stone changed. The silver veins beneath its black surface flared white. A deep beat thundered through the blood hall. Every wolf in the room lifted its head. Rhaevan froze. His hand went to his chest. The stone beat again. Leora's bound hands went cold. That rhythm was not hers. It was too powerful, too wounded, too familiar to the royal wolf shadow shaking behind the throne. The death stone did not beat with the condemned servant's heart. The stone had named why it beat. It had not yet named what it held. The death stone kept beating with Rhaevan Morcant's heart, after his name dried on Leora's sentence. A signed sentence had opened the record, but it had not yet named the hand that placed his heart there. Each pulse rolled through the blood hall like something buried under the throne had found a door, and begun striking it from the other side. The black stone's silver veins brightened, then dimmed, keeping a rhythm too deep to belong to a servant kneeling in red cord. Liora stayed where the court had put her. On her knees. Bound. Accused. Not freed by the impossible sound. Truth did not loosen servant cord, unless power allowed it to matter. The judgment cord cut into her wrists as she pressed her hands together, trying not to tremble. If she moved too quickly, Caldris would call it witchcraft. If she spoke too loudly, the court would call it manipulation. If she stayed silent, they would let the stone finish eating whatever it had opened. Rhaevan stood beside the judgment tablet with the silver quill still in his hand. His other hand was pressed to his chest. For the first time since entering the blood hall, the Alpha King looked less like the master of the sentence, and more like a man hearing his own body accuse him from outside his skin. Behind him, his royal wolf shadow flickered against the wall. The huge black shape drew one uneven breath, then another. Its chest dimmed with every beat of the stone, as if the relic were pulling rhythm through a thread no one had seen until now. Caldris Vey stepped forward before fear could become understanding. A royal pulse may answer when a servant contaminates judgment. The sentence landed quickly. Too quickly. Liora heard the practiced edge beneath it. Caldris had not been surprised enough. He had been ready to rename the sound. Prepared words were never far from prepared crimes. Contamination. That was the word courts used, when evidence rose from the wrong mouth. Rhaevan's gaze cut toward the judge. My heart is beating inside the stone. Caldris bowed his head with careful restraint. Your Majesty's bloodline is bound to every sacred instrument of justice. A condemned servant who has already touched the royal heir may disturb that bond. Liora lifted her face. Read whose heart you are holding. The court went still again, but differently this time. Not offended. Afraid. Caldris turned on her. The condemned does not command a death stone. I am not commanding it. Her voice was hoarse, but it did not break. I am listening. Something inside the black relic answered. The silver veins widened into thin cracks of light. The pulse struck harder, and Rhaevan's fingers tightened over his chest. His jaw clenched, but he did not step away. He looked at Liora, then truly looked as if the servant on her knees had become the only person in the hall standing close enough to the truth. The death stone spoke without a voice. Royal pulse entered. Air pulse weakened. Servant touch accused. King heart retained. The stone had named what it held. It had not yet named who had made it hold him. No one moved. Even the torches seemed to lower. Liora felt the words pass through her bones. They were not confession. They were record. The stone was not asking who had sinned. It was showing where life had been placed, where weakness had been blamed, and whose heart had been kept inside the judgment that was supposed to condemn her. Rhaevan stared at the black stone. The heir's pulse weakened, he said slowly. Caldress answered at once. Because she touched him. The stone beat again. Rhaevan flinched. Not from pain alone. From recognition. His wolf shadow staggered backward against the wall. The old moonlight in its chest thinned, then flickered like a candle shielded by dying hands. Liora swallowed against the cord of fear tightening around her throat. If my touch caused the weakness, the stone would hold my pulse. Caldress's eyes narrowed. A servant's reasoning is not admissible in sacred blood judgment. Then let the sacred blood judgment speak without you. A ripple passed through the court. Somewhere above, a nobleman whispered for the guards. Another whispered for silence. No one knew yet which fear would keep them safer. Rhaevan lowered the quill. Ink dripped from its tip onto the stone floor. One black drop. Then another. He looked at the sentence tablet where his name had just turned Leora's death into law. I signed before I listened. His confession did not cancel the ink. It only made the ink heavier. The words were quiet. They did not pardon him. They did not loosen the cord around her wrists. They did not erase the fact that his hand had opened the relic against her. Liora did not soften for him. No, she said. You signed before the stone was allowed to tell the truth. His eyes met hers. Pain moved there, but pain was not innocence. Liora had no use for regret that still left her bound. The death stone pulsed again, and this time Rhaevan bent slightly, as if an invisible hand had closed around his ribs. Caldress moved fast. He drew a thin ritual knife from inside his sleeve and reached for the red judgment cord binding Leora's wrists. The record is compromised, he said. The accused must be removed from contact before false resonance spreads. Liora pulled back, but she had nowhere to go. The guards behind her seized her shoulders. Rhaevan took one step forward. Caldress's blade hovered over the cord. Majesty, if the cord is cut now, the death sentence may still be completed without further contamination. There it was. Not mercy. Not correction. A cleaner execution. Rhaevan stopped. The death stone beat so hard the floor trembled. His wolf shadow buckled to one knee. The court finally saw it then. The pulse in the relic was not merely echoing the Alpha King. It was taking something from him each time it sounded. Liora looked at Rhaevan, then at the stone. I did not feed corruption into your bloodline, she said. I heard what was already being taken from it. Caldress's knife touched the red cord. The cord was not only restraint. It was contact. Cut it and the record would lose the servant witness. The stone thundered. The death stone had not found Leora's curse in the royal heir. It had found the place where the Alpha King's heart was being held to keep his bloodline breathing. And a place was not enough. A held heart had a holder. Caldress's knife rested on the red judgment cord, and Liora understood the cord was not only binding her. A cord that listened could also be made to lie. It was listening. The cord had been soaked in something older than dye, threaded with thin pulse silver that pressed against her wrists and carried every wrong rhythm she heard into the death stone. Restraint was only the surface of it. Beneath that, the cord was contact. Witness. A servant's body turned into a bridge for a record the court had never meant to let speak for long. Cut it and the stone would lose her. And losing her would not mean freeing her. It would mean restoring the court's version of her. Cut it, and the hall could pretend the record had ended in confusion. Caldress's blade touched one red strand. Liora held still because fear gave him too much if she struggled. Rhaevan took half a step forward, then stopped so sharply the silver plates on his armor rang. His face was pale beneath the black crown. One hand remained pressed to his chest, where each beat inside the stone pulled a faint answer from his body. Behind him, his wolf shadow flickered again, its massive shape thinning at the edges as if old moonlight were being drained through invisible teeth. He could cross the hall in one breath. Everyone knew it. That was why Caldress did not move the knife away. Majesty, the blood judge said calmly, "A king heart cannot be released while the succession pulse remains unstable." The words were not confession. They were doctrine. Doctrine was guilt dressed in old language, clean enough for nobles, cold enough for murder. Raven's eyes sharpened. Released. Caldrus lowered his head. The royal bloodline survives through continuity. If the heir pulse falters sacred judgment, instruments may answer with the king's strength. It is ancient preservation. Preservation, Liora whispered. Caldrus looked down at her. You would not understand what a throne must carry. No, she said. But I understand what servants are made to carry when a throne wants clean hands. His knife pressed harder. A red thread split, not fully cut, only wounded. The death stone thudded so violently that every torch flame bent toward it. Raven's wolf shadow dropped lower against the wall, one foreleg buckling, as if the relic had taken a bone from it instead of a beat. Rhaevan moved again. Liora saw the command gathering in his mouth. Release her. Stop him. Break the cord. Any order would feel like rescue for one breath. Then Caldrus would call it interference. The cord would be severed by royal force. The record would collapse. Liora would become the source of contamination again, the servant whose touch had disturbed blood judgment, the disposable body chosen to hold a crime too high to accuse. Rhaevan saw it at the same moment. His jaw clenched. If I cut the cord by force, he said, the words dragged from somewhere bitter, I make her curse again. And if he did nothing, the stone would keep eating him through her witness. Liora did not thank him for understanding late. Late understanding still left a knife on her wrists. She turned her face toward the death stone. The bead inside it rolled through her bones, heavy with the Alpha King's pulse, and something sealed around it like wire. Read who placed it there. Caldrus's knife paused, not because he feared her, because the stone answered. The black surface split with thin silver lines that formed across the judgment tablet, where Rhaevan's name still darkened the sentence. The letters did not burn. They pressed upward from inside the stone as if the record had been kept under weight. Blood Judge seal entered. King heart tethered. Air pulse sustained. Servant touch selected. The stone had named the hand. It had not yet named what the tether was feeding. The blood hall did not erupt. It tightened. Nobles leaned back from the balconies as if distance could save them from understanding. The royal guards looked from Caldrus to Rhaevan, unsure which law had just become dangerous. The death stone beat again, and this time the rhythm carried a second sound beneath it, the thin strain of a tether pulled too tight. Rhaevan stared at the words. Blood Judge seal. Caldrus straightened. All succession protections require authorized sealing. Before she touched the air, Rhaevan said. The judge's expression did not change. That was the worst part. Men who expected exposure often learned stillness before guilt. The servant was selected after instability manifested, Caldrus said. Her contact created an admissible point of blame. Liora felt the cord tighten around her wrists as if it hated being named. Selected. Not accused after an accident. Selected before the accusation could be useful. A selected servant was not evidence. She was a place prepared for blame. The heir's weakening had not begun with her hand. Her hand had only given the cord a place low enough to bury the reason. Rhaevan's voice dropped. You used the air pulse to keep my heart in the stone. Caldrus turned slightly, giving the court his profile, the posture of a loyal officer explaining necessity to fear. Your Majesty's heart sustains the line when the line weakens. Without continuity, rival pacts would scent fracture. Your wolf would be challenged. The throne would bleed from within before winter. And servants, Liora asked. Caldrus looked at her as if she had spoken from beneath the floor. Servants are bound to the crown. Liora lifted her bound wrists as much as the guards allowed. The split cord bit deeper. You did not hear my crime, she said. You used my touch as a place to hang yours. The death stone beat. The tablet changed. Beneath Rhaevan's signature, a second mark began to surface. Not a name written in ink. A seal pressed from blood, an office, thin and circular, hidden under the royal signature, like a parasite beneath a crown. Caldrus moved. Fast. His knife snapped down toward the cord. Rhaevan lunged one step, then stopped before touching him, trapped by the same truth he had spoken aloud. Force would cut the witness loose. Force would let Caldrus call the record broken. Liora twisted her wrists just enough for the blade to miss the thickest strand. It sliced skin instead of cord. Pain flashed white through her hands, but the red thread held. Blood entered the cord. The record tightened around her instead of closing. The stone roared with another beat. Rhaevan stochert. His wolf shadow almost vanished. On the tablet, the blood judge seal rose fully into silver light. The Alpha King's heart had not been trapped by Leora's touch. It had been tethered to the death stone under Caldrus Vay's blood judge seal before she ever entered the nursery. But a tether did not exist only to hold. It existed to feed something. The red cord held, but Leora's blood had entered the record. It moved along the pulse silver threads in thin dark lines, not fast enough to look like magic, and not slow enough for the court to pretend nothing had changed. The cord still bound her wrists. It still bit into skin. It still made her kneel below every noble balcony in the blood hall. But now it carried her blood into the death stone. Not to heal. Not to claim. To witness. The black relic answered with a deeper beat, and Rhaevan Morcant's hand slammed harder against his chest. His wolf shadow shuddered behind him, almost transparent at the edges, its huge muzzle lowered, as if each pulse from the stone pulled breath from its throat. Caldrus Vay's knife hovered above the cord, but he did not cut. Not yet. Liora understood why. The first slice had failed to end the record. Her blood had entered before the cord broke. And now the stone had more than Rhaevan's signature. It had her wound, his pulse, Caldrus's seal, and the accusation tied between them, 4 truths in one line. Too many to clean with a single blade. Caldrus straightened slowly. Servant blood has corrupted the record. Leora's wrists shook, but she lifted them an inch enough for the bloodied cord to glisten under the hall's cold light. No. The cord recorded what you selected it to carry. The death stone beat. A thin, silver mark appeared across the tablet beneath the blood judge seal. Servant blame selected. The court recoiled from the words then, from itself for recoiling. Caldrus's face did not change, but his fingers tightened around the knife. A tethered king heart cannot be severed while the succession pulse depends on it. Doctrine again. Older. Sharper. A sentence built to make cruelty sound like duty. Rhaevan looked at the stone as if he could hear every beat crossing from his chest into its black surface. Depends on it. Caldrus turned toward him. Majesty, the air pulse weakened. The royal line required preservation. The death stone answered with the strength of its king. This is not treason. It is continuity. Continuity that needed a servant to blame, Liora said. Caldrus did not look down at her. Continuity that required a low-risk point of accusation. Low risk. The phrase entered the hall colder than any confession. Leora's breath shortened. She had been hungry, tired, branded, and useful. That was what low risk meant when spoken by power. A person no one would spend too much truth trying to save. Rhaevan took one step closer to the stone and his wolf shadow almost collapsed. He stopped. Liora saw the calculation in his face before he spoke. If he tore the tether loose, the air pulse might fail. If he let it remain, the stone would keep taking his heart. If he freed her by force, Caldrus would call the record corrupted by servant blood and royal interference. He had power enough to break bodies, not enough to make truth admissible by force. Liora pressed her bleeding wrists closer to the stone. Pain flared up both arms. The record tightened around her instead of closing. Read what the tether feeds. The death stone's pulse struck once, twice. Then the tablet opened another layer. King heart drained. Air pulse sustained. Blood judge authority fed. Servant blame preserved. The blood hall changed in silence. Not in sound, in posture. Nobles who had leaned toward the spectacle leaned away from the judgment stone. Guards shifted their hands on spear shafts. The blood healers in their pale robes lowered their eyes, not in grief but in the trained caution of people who had known too much and survived by naming too little. Rhaevan stared at the third line. Blood judge authority fed. Caldrus lifted his chin. My office maintains lawful continuity. The stone says it feeds you. My authority, Majesty. Not my body. Liora looked at the judge's robes, the dried wine fabric, the silver pulse marks stitched at the cuffs. She had polished floors beneath those robes for years. She had watched lower servants kneel while Caldrus read death sentences in a voice almost gentle. Every time a servant was blamed, his office became more necessary. Every time the royal line appeared preserved, his seal became harder to question. You are not only sustaining the air pulse, she whispered. You were sustaining the need for you. The stone beat again. Rhaevan bent slightly, jaw locked. His wolf shadow lost one foreleg completely, the shape dissolving into smoke, before reforming weaker than before. For the first time, real fear crossed the Alpha King's face. Not fear of death, fear of killing what he had sworn to protect by trying to save himself. If I tear my heart free, he said, voice low and stripped raw, I may kill what I thought I was protecting. Liora heard the truth in it. She also heard the danger. A king who could not tear himself free might decide a servant witness was easier to lose. Her hands tightened around the cord until fresh blood pushed into the threads. No, she said, before he could ask the wrong question. Do not make me the price of your hesitation. Rhaevan looked at her. The words struck him harder than comfort would have. Caldress moved toward her again. Enough. Her blood is now inside the cord. Any further reading belongs to servant corruption. The stone answered before Liora did. Servant blame preserved. Selected contact retained. Record active. Liora almost collapsed from the pain of the cord tightening. It held her so fiercely now that every pulse dragged through the cut in her skin. The only way to keep the record open was to keep the cord intact. And the cord was hurting her more with every beat. Caldress saw it. So did Rhaevan. That was why the judge smiled faintly. She cannot hold witness long, Caldress said. Rhaevan's eyes hardened. How do I release the tether? Without killing the air pulse. Caldress did not answer. The Deathstone did. Not with a full record. Only one new line buried beneath the others. Authority fed before air sustained. Leora's breath caught. Rhaevan's face went still. Caldress's knife flashed toward the cord again. The tether was not keeping the air alive alone. It was feeding Caldress's authority every time Rhaevan's heart beat inside the Deathstone. Caldress's second strike never reached the cord cleanly. Rhaevan's command stopped every guard in the hall, but it did not touch the knife. Hold! The word cracked through the blood hall low and brutal, and the nearest soldiers froze with their spears half raised. Caldress's blade paused a finger's width above Leora's bleeding wrists. Not because he obeyed mercy, because the Alpha King had not ordered the cord cut, and that difference mattered. Liora stayed on her knees, shaking. The red judgment cord had tightened so deeply that her hands were going numb. Blood slid down her fingers and entered the pulse silver threads in slow, dark beads. Every drop made the Deathstone beat harder. Every beat pulled another flicker from Rhaevan's wolf shadow. The hall watched the three of them trapped in one ritual, the servant bound to witness the king tethered through judgment, the blood judge, standing between them with a knife and a doctrine old enough to look sacred. Caldress lowered the blade only slightly. Majesty delay risks, succession collapse. Rhaevan did not look away from the stone. The record says your authority was fed before the air was sustained. My authority is the channel through which succession protections are lawfully administered. Leora's laugh came out small and bitter. You make hunger sound like paperwork. Caldress finally looked down at her. Servants often mistake structure for cruelty, because structure does not ask their opinion before preserving the kingdom. The Deathstone beat. Liora felt the wrongness under his sentence. He did not sound afraid of being accused. He sounded afraid of the record becoming specific enough that doctrine could no longer cover it. She bent toward the stone despite the guards gripping her shoulders. Read what authority requires. The cord burned around her wrists. Rhaevan's hand lifted slightly, then closed into a fist at his side. He wanted to stop her pain. She could see it in the rigid line of his body. But he had heard enough now to understand that stopping pain too soon could restore the lie that placed it there. Liora hated that understanding. She needed it. The Deathstone opened another thin line across the tablet below Caldress's seal. Blood judge authority requires sentence. Sentence requires guilty vessel. Guilty vessel selected from bound service. Servant death preserves lawful channel. The words did not shout. They did not need to. The court understood quieter truths better when they were carved into something expensive. A noblewoman covered her mouth. A blood healer stepped backward. One of the guards holding Liora loosened his grip, then tightened it again when Caldress looked at him. Rhaevan's voice came low. Guilty vessel. Caldress inclined his head. A legal term. The stone must anchor judgment somewhere. Without an accused vessel, royal blood instability becomes panic. And panic becomes challenge, Rhaevan said. Yes, Majesty. And challenge threatens the crown. Yes. And so a servant is selected. Caldress's face remained still. A bound servant already belongs to the crown. Her standing is contained. Her loss does not fracture alliance houses. Liora looked up at him through the pane. Disposable. The word from the first judgment returned to the hall and found a place to sit. Cord did not say prisoner. Cord said disposable. Rhaevan's jaw tightened as if he remembered it too, though she had never spoken that thought aloud. The stone beat again. His wolf shadow thinned until one gold eye remained bright in its fading face. It watched Liora not with romance, not with claim, but with the exhausted recognition of something else being drained by a law that called itself preservation. Rhaevan turned toward Caldress. How many vessels? Caldress's answer was immediate, irrelevant to this judgment. Liora heard the evasion like a skipped heartbeat. She pressed her bleeding wrists down toward the stone. Read the last vessel before me. Caldress moved so fast his robes snapped. No. That was not doctrine. That was fear. The Deathstone answered anyway. Last vessel entered. Kitchen oath servant. Pulse transferred. Sentence completed. Authority renewed. Leora's stomach went cold. She knew the kitchen oath servant. Not by name. Servants were often denied the luxury of names in court records. But she remembered a girl with burned fingers who used to hum near the ash ovens because humming made hunger feel less private. One winter night the girl had been accused of souring the royal broth. She was taken to the blood hall before dawn. By morning the cook said her heart had confessed. Liora had cleaned the floor after. The stain had been black, not red. Rhaevan stared at the tablet. She died for a failed broth. Caldress's voice hardened. She died because the Deathstone recorded guilt. No, Liora whispered. She died because your authority needed a sentence. The cord tightened again, punishing the shape of truth in her mouth. Pain buckled her spine. Rhaevan took a step toward her. The Deathstone stole another beat. His wolf shadow collapsed fully to the floor, almost gone, its outline flickering like smoke underwater. Caldress lifted the knife higher. The witness is destabilizing the king heart. If she continues, His Majesty's wolf will fail before the air pulse can be secured. Liora saw the trap open in Rhaevan's face. Save the witness, risk the air. Protect the air, silence the witness. Every path had been built to make the servant look dangerous. Rhaevan looked at Liora, and for the first time there was no command in his eyes, only a question he had no right to ask and no way to avoid. How long can you hold the cord? Leora's wrists were slick with blood. Her fingers barely moved. She could have lied to hurt him. She chose the sharper truth. Long enough to prove what your sentence opened. The Deathstone beat once more. A new mark surfaced beneath the record of the kitchen servant. Not Caldress's seal. Not Rhaevan's signature. A line of older authority buried beneath both. First vessel chosen. Royal weakness concealed. Servant pulse consumed. Crown strength displayed. The blood hall seemed to tilt around her. The Deathstone had not begun with Liora or the heir, or even Rhaevan's suffering heart. It had been eating bound servants for generations to make weak crowns look strong. The old record did not rise like a scream. It rose like an account carefully kept. First vessel chosen. Royal weakness concealed. Servant pulse consumed. Crown strength displayed. Liora stared at the words until the blood hall blurred at the edges. The red judgment cord kept biting into her wrists, carrying her blood into the Deathstone in small dark threads. Her body wanted to pull away. Every instinct begged for distance from the relic. From the knife, from the royal pulse dragging pain through the floor. But if she pulled away, the court would get her silence. And silence was what the Deathstone had been built to make look lawful. Rhaevan stood beside the tablet, breathing, as if each inhale had to be taken back from the stone. His wolf shadow lay almost flat against the wall, now a fading black shape with one pale gold eye still open. It did not growl. It did not rise. It looked less like a royal beast than a wounded thing forced to watch its own strength leave in public. Caldress Vey turned toward the nobles before Rhaevan could speak. Ancient records often contain symbolic phrasing, he said. The first vessel may refer to ceremonial service, not literal consumption. Liora heard the lie immediately. Not because his voice shook. It did not. Because the death stone answered him with a tired pulse. Symbolic phrasing did not make stone sound ashamed. She forced her bleeding wrists closer to the tablet. Read what was consumed. Caldress's eyes cut down to her. The witness is overextended. Her blood has entered the cord. Further resonance may damage the king heart. Then you should have cared before you fed it. A few nobles inhaled sharply. Caldress did not. He raised his hand toward the guards. Remove her from contact. Rhaven's voice stopped them. No. The guards froze. Liora did not look at him. A command that stopped them from dragging her away was not the same as freedom. It only kept her in the place where the cord could keep hurting her. The stone opened the next record. First vessel pulse entered. Crown fever hidden. Blood judge channel formed. Servant death, renamed guilt. Liora's breath caught. Crown. Fever. So the first weakness had not been an air pulse, not a single failing child, not a rare crisis. It had been a royal sickness old enough to build law around itself. A bloodline that faltered had learned to look powerful by draining the people who served beneath it. Rhaven read the words aloud, his voice low and rough. Servant death renamed guilt. For the first time, the nobles did not murmur. They counted. Liora could feel them doing it. Every kitchen girl who vanished after a spoiled feast. Every groom accused when a royal wolf limped. Every laundress blamed when fever entered a prince's bed. Every oath-bound body carried into the blood hall and carried out as proof that justice worked. Rhaven turned to Caldress. How many? Caldress bowed his head. Majesty. The stability of a throne cannot be measured by common arithmetic. How many? The second question came with enough alpha force to make the torches gutter. The death stone beat before Caldress answered. Vessel count sealed. Royal review denied. Blood judge office custodian. Crown knowledge restricted. Rhaven's face went still. Not innocent. Never innocent. His name was still wet on Liora's sentence. His word had opened the record through her danger. But now he saw the shape of the room he had ruled from the highest chair. A throne could inherit ignorance and still profit from it. Liora looked up at him through sweat and pain. You did not count them because the law counted for you. His jaw tightened. Caldress stepped between them, his robe sweeping near the stone. The crown is not guilty for relying on lawful instruments. No, Liora said. It is guilty when it stops listening, because the instrument makes servants easier to kill. The red cord tightened. She gasped before she could stop herself. Rhaven moved. Caldress lifted the knife again, not toward the cord this time, but toward the tablet. If the witness collapses, the record collapses with her. If the king heart collapses, the succession pulse fails. Choose carefully, Majesty. There it was again. A trap shaped like responsibility. Rhaven looked at the death stone. How do I release the tether without killing the air pulse? The stone did not answer him. It answered Liora's blood. Listener contact required. Witness pulse compatible. Replacement channel possible. Liora went cold. Caldress's eyes sharpened. Rhaven turned toward her slowly. Replacement channel. Liora understood before the court did. The red cord was not only keeping her as witness, it was testing her pulse. Not because she was royal. Not because she was chosen. Because she could hear the wrong rhythm and hold contact without the record closing. The stone had found a body low enough for blame and sensitive enough for transfer. Caldress smiled faintly. A corrupted servant pulse may absorb excess instability. That would preserve both king and heir. Liora stared at him. You mean, make me the next vessel. A condemned heart may still serve the crown. Rhaven's face darkened. No, but the death stone beat harder. The cord around Liora's wrists warmed, then burned. Her blood moved through the pulse silver in a new pattern, and the tablet opened one final line. Current vessel failing. King heart unstable. Servant witness viable. Transfer prepared. Liora could no longer feel her fingers. Rhaven reached one hand toward her, then stopped before touch could become interference. The death stone had shown the past. Now it had chosen the shape of the next sentence. The royal line would not survive by freeing Liora Venn. It would survive by making her heart replace the king's inside the stone. The transfer began before anyone gave it permission. The red judgment cord warmed around Leora's wrists, until the blood threaded through it seemed to pulse backward into her skin. She tried to pull away, but the guards held her shoulders and the cord held more cruelly than any hand. The death stone beat with Raven's heart, then answered with a thinner rhythm beneath it. Hers. Not taken yet. Measured. Tested. Caldris Vey lowered his knife and smiled with the calm of a man who had found a legal path through murder. The stone has offered preservation. Rhaevan's voice cut across the hall. It offered theft. The condemned heart is viable, Caldris said. The king heart is unstable. The air pulse depends on continuity. This is the cleanest path. Clean. Liora almost laughed, but the sound turned into a breath of pain. In the blood hall, clean meant someone lower had been chosen to carry the stain. The cord tightened again. Her pulse stumbled. The death stone answered immediately, hungry for the mistake. Rhaevan flinched as if the same pain had crossed his own chest. His wolf shadow lifted its fading head from the wall. One pale gold eye fixed on Liora, not with claim, not with mate recognition, not with any soft miracle the court could twist into romance. It looked at her as another living thing trapped inside a system that fed on obedience. Rhaevan took one step toward Caldris. The stone stole another beat from him. He stopped, teeth clenched. Do not place her heart in mine. Caldris turned robes, whispering over the stone floor. Majesty, a king does not survive by refusing what the line requires. A king does not survive by feeding servants to his crown. History disagrees. The words fell like a locked door. Liora looked at the death stone. Her sight blurred from pain, but the rhythm remained clear. Too clear. It had been clear all her life, the tired stone, the trapped pulses, the wrong beat beneath noble halls. She had thought that made her broken. She had thought hearing too much was a servant's private shame. Now the stone was trying to use it as a doorway. She pressed her bleeding wrists harder into the cord before fear could make her pull back. Read why my heart is viable. Caldris's face shifted. Only slightly. Enough. Silence her, he ordered. The guards tightened their hold, but Rhaevan's voice stopped them again. No one touches her mouth. The court heard the difference. He still did not free her, still did not break the ritual. But for the first time, his command protected the question, not merely the crown. The death stone answered through the blood-threaded cord. Wrong rhythm heard. Heart record recognized. Ownership trace followed. Listener pulse confirmed. Leora's breath caught. Listener. The word struck places in her memory she had never allowed herself to open. Her mother's hand over her ear when she was small. A whisper beside the laundry fires. Do not tell them the walls have hearts. Do not tell them the stone is tired. People who hear what belongs to others are made responsible for what they reveal. Caldris spoke before the court could understand. A sensitivity defect among lower servants. Nothing more. The stone beat. Listener pulse confirmed. The repeated line was quieter than a shout, and stronger than one. Rhaevan looked at Liora. You knew the stone was wrong before today. I heard it, she said. Knowing would have required someone to believe a servant. His expression tightened. Good, she thought through the pain. Let that sit where regret cannot clean it. Caldris lifted his hands toward the nobles. A listener pulse is precisely why she is dangerous. Such a heart can carry unstable records. The stone has identified her as the safest replacement channel. No, Liora whispered. It identified why you selected me. The cord burned hotter. The tablet opened again. Listener bloodline marked. Low standing retained. Blame suitability high. Transfer concealment possible. The nobles stirred at last, not from compassion, but from the sudden fear that selection had rules. Rules meant records. Records meant repetition. Rhaevan's wolf shadow shuddered, its fading body dragging itself halfway upright. Rhaevan stared at the tablet. You knew what she was. Caldris's eyes hardened. I knew what the kingdom needed. That is not an answer. It is the only answer. Thrones survive. Leora's wrists throbbed. The cord had begun pulling with each beat, as if the death stone were testing how much of her pulse could enter before her body failed. She could feel the shape of the transfer waiting a hollow place beside Raven's heart record prepared for hers. Not death yet. Use first. Death later. She forced herself to stay upright. Read what happens after transfer. Caldress moved at once. Enough. This time he did not aim for the cord. He aimed for the tablet. The knife struck the stone surface and a shriek of silver pulse light tore through the hall. Liora screamed as the cord tightened around her cut wrists. Rhaevan doubled over one hand against his chest. His wolf shadow flickered almost out of existence. But the record did not close. It bled through the wound Caldress had made in the tablet. Servant heart installed. King heart relieved. Listener voice sealed. Blame completed after use. Liora went very still. After use. Rhaevan lifted his head slowly, and whatever remained of softness in the hall died under the look in his eyes. You were going to save my heart, he said. Then, execute her as the curse anyway. Caldress did not deny it. He only raised his chin. A condemned vessel cannot be left alive after carrying royal instability. Doctrine again. Guilt dressed in old language. The cord dragged another pulse from Liora. The stone prepared to take more. Rhaevan looked at the cord, at the tablet, at the almost vanished shadow of his wolf, and then at Liora kneeling where his signature had placed her. How do I stop the transfer without cutting the witness? Liora tried to answer. The cord tightened around her throat of pulse before words could rise. The death stone answered instead. Listener consent required for clean transfer. Forced transfer unstable. Blood judge override pending. Caldress's hand moved toward the seal at his sleeve. Liora understood too late. The death stone could not cleanly take her heart unless she yielded. But Caldress had built a way to force what consent refused. And the blood judge override had already begun to open. Caldress's sleeve split with red-silver light before Liora could force another breath past the cord. The seal hidden beneath his cuff opened like an old wound, thin lines of blood script crawling over his wrist and into the air. It did not look violent at first. That made it worse. It looked official. Clean. A beautiful legal pattern written in pulse light meant to make theft appear disciplined enough for noble eyes. The death stone answered it with a hollow beat. Liora felt the cord tighten around her wrists, then deeper, as if it were trying to reach the rhythm beneath her skin. The transfer was not taking her heart yet. It was preparing the place where consent should have been. Caldress raised his marked hand. Blood judge override invoked. The words struck the hall like a verdict already signed. Rhaevan moved toward him. The stone dragged a beat from the king's chest before he reached the first step. His wolf shadow collapsed to one knee again, nearly transparent, its pale gold eye flickering against the wall. Rhaevan stopped with his hand clenched around nothing. Liora saw the trap tightening. If he struck Caldress, the record would be named royal violence. If he cut the cord, the witness would be severed. If he did nothing, the override would force her heart into the stone and call it lawful preservation. Caldress knew it too. Majesty, he said, voice controlled the condemned, has refused clean transfer. The law permits blood judge substitution when royal continuity is threatened. Substitution. Rhaevan's voice was very quiet. Caldress turned his blood-marked palm toward Liora. A lower witness cannot be allowed to endanger the succession through personal fear. Leora's mouth tasted of iron. Personal fear. Her wrists burned. You tie a servant to a stone, prepare her heart for use, and call refusal fear. Caldress did not even glance at her. Refusal from a condemned vessel carries no sovereign weight. The death stone beat again. Then the tablet opened a new line beneath the record of forced transfer. Listener refusal entered. Consent denied. Blood judge override requested. King signature authority referenced. Rhaevan went still. So did Liora. Caldress's eyes sharpened, but he spoke before the court could understand. The king's signature authorized the sentence. The override proceeds under that authority. Rhaevan looked at the tablet where his name still lay dark across Leora's death sentence. His signature had not only opened the record, it had become the handle Caldress could use to force her. Liora watched that truth reach him. She did not pity him. The ink had always been heavier than regret. You signed me into his hand, she said. Rhaevan's face tightened as if she had struck him. Yes. No excuse followed. That made the admission sharper. Caldrus lifted his hand higher. The blood script curled toward the red cord, searching for Leora's pulse. Then the sentence stands. The cord dragged a thin sound from her before she could stop it. Pain lanced through both arms. The death stone thudded with Rhaevan's heart, then answered with the faint rhythm of hers beneath it, not yet captured but surrounded. Rhaevan took one step toward the judgment tablet instead of toward Liora. Caldrus's gaze snapped to him. Do not touch the record. Rhaevan looked down at his own name. Why? Because a signed death sentence cannot be challenged without opening the judgment against the signer. The hall went cold. There it was. The door Caldrus had hidden behind every law. A king could save face by letting a servant die. But if he contested the sentence after signing it, the death stone would not only question the accused, it would question the royal hand that condemned her. Rhaevan placed his palm on the edge of the tablet. The stone seized another beat from him so fiercely he almost bent. His wolf shadow dimmed until only a faint outline remained. Liora forced herself to speak. Do not make pain look noble if you still leave me bound. His eyes lifted to hers. Tell me what keeps the record open. The cord, she said. And what keeps the override moving? My sentence. His gaze dropped back to his name. Caldrus stepped forward. Majesty withdrawing judgment now will admit royal error before every house in this hall. Rhaevan's hand closed over the tablet edge. It was error. No, Caldrus said sharply. It was law. Rhaevan looked at him. Then law carried my error well. The death stone beat. The tablet answered. Signer challenge entered. Royal judgment contested. Condemned witness retained. Override delayed. Not stopped. Delayed. Liora felt the cord loosen by the width of a breath. Not enough to free her. Enough to keep her pulse from being dragged fully into the transfer. She almost collapsed from that small mercy. Caldrus saw the delay and moved his blood-marked hand toward the seal again. A king may contest error. A blood judge may preserve continuity. The red script flared brighter. The tablet opened one more line. Blood judge override. Seeking alternate authority. Rhaevan's jaw tightened. Whose authority? The stone answered. Prior vessel sentences. Servant deaths retained. Blood judge office, fed by completed blame. The hall finally made a sound, then not outrage, not compassion, but panic, wrapped in silk. The nobles had trusted death sentences because each one sat safely below them. Now those old sentences were becoming power Caldrus could use without the king. Liora understood what the stone had revealed. Caldrus did not only feed on Rhaevan's heart. He fed on every completed servant blame before her. Every vessel had made his office stronger. Every death had become stored authority. Every condemned heart gave him more right to condemn the next. The override did not need truth. It needed precedent. Caldrus's hand descended toward Liora. The red cord tightened again. Rhaevan's palm remained on the tablet, bloodless with strain, but he did not remove it. How do I stop authority built from dead servants? He asked. Liora could barely see through pain, but she heard the stone under every heartbeat. Make it read them, she whispered. Caldrus's face changed. Only then, real fear quick and bright. He thrust his blood-marked hand toward the cord. The death stone thundered. The override had found its strength in every servant death Caldrus had completed before Liora. And the only way to break it was to force the blood hall to hear the hearts it had already buried. The first buried heart did not speak in words. It struck the death stone once from underneath. A small beat. Weak. Human. Then another followed it. Then another. Not rising as ghosts. Not tearing through the blood hall. Not attacking the court that had watched them die. They came only as records' thin pulses pressed into the black stone, each one stored beneath Caldrus Vay's authority like coins hidden under a temple floor. Liora felt them through the red cord. Every beat dragged against the cuts in her wrists, but she did not pull away. The cord was hurting her because it was still connected. Pain had become the price of keeping the record open, and the court knew it. That made their silence uglier than their whispers had ever been. Caldrus's blood-marked hand hovered above her. The override waited. Not stopped. Hungry. Rhaevan stood with one palm braced on the judgment tablet, his name dark across Liora's sentence. His wolf shadow was almost gone behind him, a faint black outline trembling against the wall. Each buried pulse that entered the stone seemed to pull at him too, as if his heart had become the road every old servant death had been forced to travel. Caldress spoke through clenched control. Dead sentence records cannot be reopened through a condemned vessel. Liora lifted her bleeding wrists as much as the cord allowed. Then why are they feeding your hand? The Deathstone answered. Completed blame entered. Servant pulse consumed. Blood judge authority increased. Future judgment empowered. The nobles shifted like wolves scenting fire in their own den. Rhaevan read the lines, his voice low. Future judgment empowered. Caldress turned sharply toward him. A court must carry precedent. Leora's mouth tightened. Precedent is what you call a murder after it helps the next one. The cord burned. She almost bent over, but she forced herself upright. If she collapsed, Caldress would call the witness unstable. If she screamed, he would call it corruption. If she endured too quietly, the court might forget she was still bleeding for the truth they were finally willing to hear. Rhaevan saw the tremor pass through her arms. His jaw tightened. He did not touch her. He did not free her. For once his restraint hurt him more than his command. Read the completed hearts, Liora whispered. Caldress's hand flashed toward the cord. Rhaevan's voice struck the hall. If he touches the witness, the blood judge touches the record. The guards froze. Caldress stopped with his fingers above Leora's blood. The Deathstone beat. Blood judge contact pending. Record contamination traceable. For the first time, Caldress withdrew his hand. Not far. Enough to show fear. The tablet opened beneath the first buried pulse. Kitchen oath servant entered. Sentence completed. Pulse consumed. Authority renewed. Another line followed. Stable bondservant entered. Royal wolf fever concealed. Pulse consumed. Authority renewed. Then another. Laundry oath widow entered. Succession. Weakness concealed. Pulse consumed. Authority renewed. The hall began to breathe badly. Names were still missing, but shapes had returned. Kitchens. Stables. Laundry rooms. Workplaces below noble notice, all turned into graves with legal seals. Liora felt each record strike the cord and pass through her blood into the stone. She had scrubbed floors beside people like them. She had eaten beside people like them. She had watched empty cots become ordinary by morning. Rhaevan's face darkened with each line. How many, he asked. The Deathstone answered before Caldress could. Count sealed by blood judge office. Royal review denied. Servant names removed. Blame records retained. Rhaevan's fingers dug into the tablet edge. You removed their names but kept their blame. Caldress's voice turned hard. Names create petitions. Blame creates order. The honesty was so naked that even the nobles looked away. Liora stared at him. Order for whom? The stone beat. Blood judge authority fed. Crown strength displayed. Lower service expendable. Rhaevan flinched as the words entered the hall. Not because they surprised him enough. Because they did not surprise him completely. That was the worst guilt. Somewhere inside every royal law he had inherited, he had known servants disappeared more easily than nobles. He had not built the machine, but he had sat above it while it worked. Liora saw that knowledge enter his face. Do not make horror your innocence, she said. The words cut through him. He looked down at her. I will not. Caldress seized the moment. Majesty, the condemned is turning lawful record into rebellion. If you continue, every rival house will say, Morcant blood was sustained by servant death. Rhaevan looked at the tablet. Was it Caldress did not answer? The Deathstone did. Crown strength displayed. Servant death concealed. Royal benefit retained. Signer line protected. Rhaevan closed his eyes once. When he opened them, the court quieted. Not because they trusted mercy. Because they recognized decision. What breaks the override, he asked. The stone did not answer him. Liora did. Not force. Her voice shook. Not cutting the cord. Not freeing me before the record is finished. His authority is built from completed blame. You have to make the sentence read what it never reads. Rhaevan looked at his signature. The signer. Caldress stepped forward. No Alpha King has ever submitted his heart to a death record. Rhaevan's mouth hardened. Then every Alpha King before me had servants available instead. The death stone thudded. His wolf shadow flickered, almost gone. Liora felt the red cord loosen by a thread, then tighten again as the override fought back. Caldrus's seal burned brighter across his wrist, feeding on precedent on completed sentences on every unnamed servant death that had made his office untouchable. Rhaven turned to Liora. "If I enter the record, does it spare you?" "No," she said. The answer was brutal and necessary. "It makes the record honest. That is all." He absorbed that. Then he placed his other hand over his written name. Caldrus lunged toward the tablet. "Majesty, if the stone reads you, it may condemn the crown itself." Rhaven did not move. "My crown signed her death." His voice carried to every balcony. "Let the stone read the hand that signed." The death stone stopped beating. For one terrible breath, the hall held no rhythm at all. Then the black tablet opened beneath Rhaevan Morcant's name. And for the first time in the Blood Hall's history, the heart record prepared to judge an Alpha King. The death stone did not begin with Rhaven's guilt. It began with his signature. The black tablet opened beneath his name, and the ink spread through the stone like a vein remembering blood. Rhaevan Morcant stood with both hands on the record shoulders, rigid face pale from the beats already stolen out of him. His wolf shadow behind him had almost vanished, reduced to a trembling outline and one exhausted gold eye. Liora remained on her knees below the tablet wrists bound in the red judgment cord. Bleeding. Listening. Not saved yet. Caldrus Vey raised his blood-marked hand. A crown signature cannot be judged through servant contact. Rhaven did not look away from the stone. Then removed the servant blame from the record. Caldrus's mouth tightened. That would collapse the sentence. Good. The death stone beat once. The tablet answered. Signer entered. Death sentence opened. Servant witness endangered. Royal benefit retained. Listening refused. Rhaven's hands tightened on the stone. Liora felt the words strike him, but she did not soften. She had no use for a king who suffered beautifully while servants remained bound. Caldrus stepped closer. Majesty, the record shows procedural participation, not malice. Liora lifted her bleeding wrists. Procedure killed enough servants to feed your office. The red cord burned in answer. The stone opened another line. Blood judge authority attached to completed blame. Signer authority used to activate vessel. Condemned witness required for exposure. Override unstable. Caldrus's seal flared across his wrist, red, silver, and furious. He reached for the cord again. Rhaevan moved faster than anyone expected, but he did not touch Caldrus. He slammed one hand flat over his own signature, forcing the death stone to pull from him instead of through Liora's cord. The whole hall shook. Rhaven staggered but stayed standing. His wolf shadow collapsed completely, then flickered back as a thin, broken shape. Liora's cord loosened by a breath. Not enough, but enough to let her speak without choking on pain. "Do not make this absolution," she said. Rhaven looked down at her. Her voice was low, shaking, and merciless. "Make it record." Something in his face changed, not into softness, into obedience to the truth he had avoided too long. He turned back to the tablet. "Read what my sentence allowed." The stone thundered. Alpha signature entered. Blood judge override empowered. Servant blame made lawful. King heart drained under protected seal. Crown benefited from completed deaths. A cry moved through the blood hall, but it died quickly because no one knew how to object to a relic they had called sacred for generations. Caldrus did. He always had words ready. "Royal benefit is not royal guilt," he said. "A crown may benefit from instruments it did not design." Rhaevan's jaw tightened. Liora looked at him through pain. "But it can stop pretending the instrument was clean." He closed his eyes once. Then he opened them and removed the black and silver crown from his head. The hall went silent. Caldrus froze. "Majesty." Rhaevan placed the crown on the tablet beside his signature, then read the crown too. The death stone beat so hard that cracks of white light split across its black surface. Crown entered. Servant pulse consumed through generations. Royal strength displayed. Blood judge office fed. Names removed. Blame retained. The buried heart records struck from underneath. Not ghosts. Not revenge. Records. Kitchen, oath servant. Stable bond servant. Laundry oath widow. Ash floor carrier. Kennel, water girl. The names came slowly, at first incomplete and damaged, then clearer as the crown remained on the stone. Liora felt them pass through the cord, not as bodies rising but as stolen rhythms returning to record. Her blood kept the witness line open. Raven's crown gave the stone authority to name what royal law had erased. Caldress's face finally broke. Not into confession. Into calculation without cover. If those names enter royal record, he said, every death sentence under my office can be challenged. Raven looked at him. Then your office was built on deaths, it feared reading. Caldress raised his marked hand toward the tablet. Blood judge override final authority. The red-silver seal lunged for the cord. Liora could not move. Raven could not cut it. The death stone answered first. Final authority contested by signer. Completed blame, reassigned. Servant names restored. Blood judge seal exposed. Override denied. Caldress's seal shattered into thin red sparks. It did not kill him. It did something worse for a man like him. It made him ordinary. The guards looked to Raven. He looked at Liora. Only then did he step down from the tablet and kneel in front of her. The hall shuddered at the sight. An Alpha King kneeling before an oath-bound servant was not romance. Not yet. It was not forgiveness. It was a correction made in public, where the harm had been public. May I remove the cord? He asked. Leora's hands trembled. Her wrists were torn. The cord still held the last warmth of the record. She looked at the death stone. It pulsed once. Witness complete. Servant blame denied. Heart record retained. Only then did she answer. Yes. Rhaevan broke the red cord with his bare hands. The moment it fell, the death stone released a single deep beat. His wolf shadow returned against the wall, weak but whole enough to stand. The air pulse did not fail. No cradle screamed from the nursery tower. No royal bloodline collapsed. Because the tether had never been feeding the air alone. It had been feeding fear office and the convenience of blaming those with no power to answer. Caldress was seized by the same guards who had held Liora down. He did not beg. He began reciting statutes, even as they took his knife, his seal, and his robe clasps. Rhaevan ordered every Deathstone record sealed for preservation, not destruction. Every servant name was to be restored before any royal feast hunt alliance or coronation continued. No one would be executed by heart record until the dead had been read. Then he turned to Liora. I cannot ask you to forgive what my name signed. No, she said. I cannot make my regret clean. No. His throat moved. Then tell me what I can do. Liora looked at the death stone, now quiet for the first time she could remember. Listen before you sign. Rhaevan bowed his head. Not to a mate. Not to a Luna. Not to a hidden queen. To the servant witness his court had tried to turn into a curse. When Liora Venn walked out of the blood hall, she did not walk free of pain. Her wrists were bandaged in white linen. Her name was still low-born. Her future was still dangerous. But the court could no longer call her disposable. Behind her, the death stone stood black and silent, holding not guilt but record. And for the first time in Morcant history, a servant's heart had not confessed to royal damage. It had made royal damage answer.